Good morning and welcome to the return of the Vickery Holman at Leisure series, where we take a look at the hotel and hospitality sectors across the Southwest. We want to provide a market update, speak with owners and promoters of all that is good in the tourism industry, and check in with other Vickery Holman departments, get a take on the sector and what's happening across our region. Thank you to everyone who has joined us live this morning, and particularly to our panelists, Jason Parry of Harbour Hotels, Robin Barker of Services for Tourism, and Rob Beale, who heads up our valuation services for the company. I'm sure that those in attendance will know these contacts, and we look forward to hearing from them. During the session, you'll also see there is an opportunity to ask a question, so that we can put that to our panelists, and we'll deal with a question and answer session towards the end of today's webinar. Please use the live chat function on the screen, and we'll do our level best to address anything that comes through. Today's event is being recorded and will be broadcast via the Vickery Holman YouTube channel. So if you have any contacts that you feel will be interested in what we're doing, please do let them know. Special mention at this point to Leslie Anderson of Hedgerow Marketing for setting this up, promoting the event for us, and Leslie is monitoring the chat for us this morning. So our opening session is focused on the hotel market, and Jason will give us an operator's view on how the summer has gone for Harbour Hotels, and looking at the winter ahead and in the longer term to see what the plans for the group are. We always want to discuss the challenges and the wins that we get from what is a very strong industry in the Southwest. And this will be followed by Robert Beale, who will give us a valuer's view on lenders' appetite and what they look for when valuing hotels across the region. We'll follow that by no means least with Robin Barker of Services for Tourism, who really is the face of tourism in the Southwest and a huge supporter of all that is good for the enterprises that we're all involved in. Hopefully then, time permitting, we can get together at the end for any questions from the audience. And I see already people are starting to sign in, and thank you very much again for joining. So I'm going to kick off, excuse me, with our market review. I'd first point you to our YouTube channel. In fact, we've ran an autumn series covering all of the sectors that we cover, including hotels and hospitality, and that is available to view via YouTube. And I don't want to repeat myself too much for those that have already seen this, and we only have so much time today. I can, though, confirm that the appetite for hotels remains particularly strong in the tourist hotspots across the region, and particularly in the country house market, where we have low stock levels and a rise in new entrants. And this has created a seller's market from what many had originally predicted to be a buyer's one. Branded interest and development remain strong, and with new openings on the horizon, most notably 250 rooms at Sandy Park and 150 rooms in 2 sites for the Fragrance Group down in Paynton. There's a strong pipeline following that up, notably in Plymouth. And we've also had a number of new openings this year, which includes the 70-bedroom hotel for Bodmin Jail, and of course 50 bedrooms for the new Harbour Beach Club down in South Sands and Salcombe, to which I'll be talking to Jason about in a moment. So I think it's fair to say the hotel market is looking very robust in the medium to the longer term. We've gone through a year where occupancy and room rate hasn't been so much the focus, more customer satisfaction, and perhaps more importantly, staff satisfaction. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first contributor onto the virtual stage, Jason Parry of Harbour Hotels. Harbour Hotels, for those that know them, have 15 full-service sites across the south, and particularly strong down here in the southwest, with a number of very well-known venues in Devon and Cornwall. And of course, this does include the new opening down at South Sands. So, Jason, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Just for the benefit of those online, could you just give us a sort of praise to your Harbour Hotels, where it all began and how you got involved?
Okay, so Harbour Hotels has been going probably for about 15, 18 years now. It started up as a property in Christchurch, which is now the Christchurch Harbour, originally the Avonmouth, and gradually grew. I joined about 12 years ago, thanks to Mark Godfrey, who I see is already on the call. He employed me whilst at Harbour. And we then grew continually. Salcombe was the 5th hotel, and we're now, as you said, 15 as it stands. So.
Very, I mean, you're a very strong brand, and you continue to grow actually in what have been more challenging times. You know, you picked up a couple of really well-known sites. I suppose the Metropole in Padstow is a site that everybody knows. Be interesting to know actually perhaps what your plans are there in the longer term. I would imagine at the minute it's just been a matter of operating and getting on with things. Yeah,
so we've refurbished the property already when we first bought it to bring it more in line with the rest of the brand, and that, you know, there's potential growth within there for a spa and things as well, you know, subject to planning in the future.
Fair enough. So I'll take you back to the start of the year. You probably had some expectations from what everybody went through last year. I wonder if with the season we just had, whether that was something you were expecting in New Year.
I think as we turned into closed down on New Year's Eve, it was a bit, you know, how long will this last? What's going to happen? Lots of concern. Staff put off on furlough again. But in fairness, you know, as soon as we opened bookings, they were flooding in, and we could see quite soon that it was going to be a bumper year. Certainly with our coastal properties, cities are a bit slower, but the coastal certainly flourished right the way through. So yeah, we couldn't have wanted much more really to be able to reopen to that. But I think what was really important is how we engage with the team during that time that we were closed. There was lots of different activities. There was online fitness sessions, cocktail master classes, cooking with our chef patron Alex Aitken, a quiz every week, and you know, I even posted a little video on our intranet each week to keep the team updated with what was happening. So it was you know, it was quite fun and a bit different to what we've done in the past.
That's funny actually. That does take me back to talking to operators as people were starting to open up again, and it was really clear where some operators perhaps had just run the furlough, let staff go, maybe hadn't been engaged with them during that period, and really did struggle then when there was a need to reopen, just staff coming back to work, maybe going off for opportunities. So I gather you've got quite a strong team, but that's borne out by engaging, I suppose.
Yeah, well, actually from the very first lockdown, the intention was to actually reopen with what the team members we closed with. And that was a direction from our chairman. And that continued really right the way through. So we had very few redundancies across the estate. I think we employ over 1,000 people, and there's about 12 redundancies.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it was a key thing. Obviously, furloughs helped a lot with that, but keeping people engaged and interested was another big part of it.
So you've got some sites that, you know, they're in small communities, and again, it's, you know, it's a staff thing. Was there anything you did there because in effect you haven't got a big pool of people for all of your, you know, Bristol, naturally, Guildford, so, you know, Southampton, but yeah, when we look at Salcombe, when we look at I suppose St Ives to a certain extent, Foy, yeah, what did you have to do to, you know, try and keep teams together?
Well, if we take Salcombe as an example, we already had an existing property in a very tight area for labour, and then we opened another one just for the hell of it. It's very challenging because, of course, not only were hotels buoyant this year, as were all the holiday homes, and I think if anyone was considering selling their properties, they kept them for the summer at least to use as holiday lets, which made recruitment very difficult and provided any form of accommodation. We tried pretty much everything, and in the end, we were recruiting student apartments in Plymouth, and taxiing staff in accordingly. So it did add to a different dimension to the challenges that recruitment normally has.
Yeah. And do you think, because there was a lot of talk about staff and staff conditions and how to encourage them, lots of people talked about perhaps left the industry, so on and so forth. Have you made any plans for the future to try and sort of further engage, to keep people with you?
Yeah, so what we did, we looked at everything we did, how we do things, and we felt that when we're asking more of people, we should pay them more. So we put in a seasonal allowance. We've always been, we pay above living wage already as a base rate, but we were upping our hourly rates to £14 for entry level roles through the summer period in order to ensure that, if we were asking more of people, they were being rewarded better for it. We also opened up to every sort of flexible working we could. If somebody only wanted to work 3 hours on a Tuesday, we'd consider it. It literally became that we would look to see how we could get the team in. It would increase our headcount, but what it meant was we were able to work with everybody. So it wasn't just that's the job and everyone has to get on with it. It was more this is the what do you need, and then we can look and see if we can accommodate.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So summer, customers flooding down, new opening. South Sound Salcombe, constructors on site, I'm guessing. Yeah. Finishing off, how did it go?
So we opened on the 31st of July. We got handed the building the day before. So it was challenging. I would always say character building for the team. It was good. It was great fun. We were very busy. We had a sort of slower start for the first week, where we gradually brought bits on for the hotel. But it was, pretty much by week 2, we were full on. The hotel was full. Yes, there was still construction taking place on the apartments above, and a little bit of finishing off. But, on the whole, the team did exceptionally well. And once the guests were inside the hotel, they were able to relax and enjoy themselves.
Good. And has obviously it was a really, really busy summer season that's overspilled into the more traditional shoulder months. How's it faring up at the moment? Are you sort of been able to take a breath, get a chance?
At the beach club, yes. So our business is off a bit now. The other properties, I look after the 3 properties in Devon. Salcombe Harbour is still very buoyant. It's seeing a slight easing now, but no, it's by no means quiet. And then the in Sidmouth, likewise, it's still delivering good levels of business for us. So we expect it to continue throughout. And Christmas is looking strong in the 2 other properties as well. So.
And I mean, I'm guessing that bookings come in earlier as well. We've gone through this whole migration where some people would book their family holiday, a year in advance. That then disappeared overnight with the online travel agents and booking.com, and everyone started going later and later. But are you maybe seeing a return to people booking a bit earlier, worried that everything will fill out?
Forward bookings are looking very good. I think there's an element, of staycation that will stay next year. Not to the levels we've had this year, but I think it'll still be there to an extent. And then with the all-important good weather helps. The sun shines in Devon and Cornwall. There's nowhere better.
Yes. Yeah. If only there were more days where the
Absolutely.
sun shines. It is what it is. And then looking ahead, are there any general plans for the group that you can share with the people that are on today?
So there's no firm properties in the lined up to increase. But the group's definitely looking. There's no secret of that. And we will continue to invest in the existing properties to maintain and develop them further. During the closure periods, we invested very heavily in all the properties. It was a great opportunity to, so we were able to start the year strong, and we'll continue now going on to through the winter. So as when we go into next year, we've got in essence what feels like all new properties throughout.
Okay, Jason, thank you. I'm going to just ask those that are on the call if there is anything you'd like to ask Jason, because he's given his time very kindly this morning. So please feel free to put something on, and then Jason, we may well bring you back towards the end of the session.
No problem.
Just to put you on the spot again.
No problem at all.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm now going to move on and talk valuations and bring on Robert Beale. Robert heads our valuation team across the region, and I hope he can give us some insight over the past 12 months from a valuer's point of view. And Robert, if I can just ask you to join us on the screen.
Morning, Mike.
Good morning. So I suppose the big question to my mind is really what the lender's appetite has been for hotels and other accommodation. I think we've probably just got to be a bit broader from that point of view. I get the feel that it's probably stronger for accommodation than perhaps it is in food and beverage markets, but interesting to get your take on that.
Yeah, sure. It's been a very interesting couple of years. As you can imagine, when COVID first hit, the leisure sector was one everyone thought would be really badly hit by what was going to happen. And I think in those early days, there's quite a few lenders that quite quickly started restricting what they might want to lend to the sector. Of course, then as that 29, this is the year panned out, we then started to see that with the UK population almost being trapped at home, but still wanting to go out and enjoy themselves, particularly during the main summer season, most operators had an excellent year, ignoring the staffing problems we've seen this year. So I think actually quite quickly the banks opened their books to leisure operators again pretty quickly. At the moment, it's still a mixed bag. It always is a mixed bag. The leisure market is quite a strange one with lenders that some of them seem to get cold feet about it. I think they worry about the volatility of the sector, that it can very quickly change its performance, or the sector can see quite significant changes to costs. So if we look at the main cost of wages, rates, and then usually it's utilities. So this year, for example, of course, whilst the turnover has been going up with many businesses through occupancy levels and the demand there is, of course, a lot of wage costs have had to go up to try and retain the staff they've got. And of course, we all know that utility costs have gone up this year and are likely to continue going up. So I think there's quite a few lenders still in the marketplace, but they are a bit more circumspect, and they certainly like to make sure that they've got all their ducks lined up. They very much like a proven trader, and those people that have got existing relationships with their managers, long-term relationships with the bank. They're always the one, from what we see on the valuation side, who actually are able to increase finance, raise new finance, whether it's a new purchase or they want to reinvest in their existing property. Those are the ones that seem to just kind of go through the process a lot easier than, for example, a new operator or even a well-established operator that's changing banks for whatever reason. There's always a lot more hoops to join when you don't have that established record with the bank.
Yeah, it's quite interesting looking at that from our side, agency side, where you're trying to sell stock. It seems ultimately that quite a lot of it has been held up by, in effect, the increase in prices in the residential market, just bringing more cash in rather than necessarily banks changing any criteria as such. It's just more available cash in the system. So that's quite telling. You don't know how long that will continue for, but that's what we've
and likewise, certainly what we've seen across the southwest, as we know, is external investment. So as we know, there's been a lot of international money coming into the southwest in particular and going direct into leisure properties, most of the time with no finance involved whatsoever. So that again has been a bit of a game changer in terms of likely demand for money from the bank. So it could well be that the banks have actually seen a reduction of demand for typical commercial lending. And of course, most businesses have taken out the COVID grants that were offered by the government. So a lot of them, they might have had plans to borrow money from their lender to reinvest or to purchase, whereas actually they've probably now got the COVID money and are using that instead.
Interesting. Thank you. A bit more technical, move on to. What are you generally looking for when you're valuing a hotel? What's your processes in order to put the reports together?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, obviously profit is key. When we're looking at the valuation of a trading concern, what we're going to do is drill down and find what we think is a fair, maintainable profit for the business, and that's the one that we're going to come across. And Certainly a conversation we quite frequently have with operators is their current accounts might show a profit of X, but actually if we've done our analysis of the accounts and we think they might be over trading or they could be under trading, we might be reporting to the bank a different profit level compared to what their own accounts show. And that can sometimes benefit them, and sometimes it can also be seen as kind of we're undervaluing what they've got. But we obviously look at the last 3 years accounts for the business, and are looking through those accounts to try and see the story they tell, match that to what we see on site, and really try and understand where this business is both operating itself. So where is the business operating with its own lifespan, but also how does that fit into the general marketplace of the Southwest that we work in. So when we're on site, we'll obviously look around the property. We want to see, well, what is it? Whilst we're on site, we're also looking for signs of how it's run. And also you can just see, the condition it's in. Is it kind of slightly fallen behind the times with its maintenance? Is there a kind of clear, obvious signs that maintenance isn't quite where it should be, or they've not kept up to speed with the investment they require? The usual one, of course, is sometimes they say, oh yeah, we're a 4-star hotel, and going around quite a few hotels within the Southwest, you sometimes look at it and think, well, you might just be 4 stars, but if you don't invest fairly soon, I think you're going to slip down because you're not quite meeting the benchmarks that other 4-star, 5-star hotels in the area offer. And then we're obviously trying to compare what we see on site and what we hear on site to what we see in the accounts, because obviously the accounts usually do tell their own story. And even if we're told a certain story on site, we can sometimes find ourselves going back to the people over the phone and asking kind of quite pertinent questions, like, asking why last year their repairs and renewals were so high compared to this year, or if there might be kind of additional income that came into the accounts that we can't quite pin down to something. So we really kind of almost kind of forensically need to go through the accounts to really understand where the business sits. And that's the key thing that we're doing with the valuation process. Obviously, when we're looking at the marketplace for comparable evidence, again, we drill down into that, because as we all know, the headline price quoted in the PR piece isn't always necessarily the price that was actually paid. And so if we're relying upon that as a comparable piece of evidence, we've got to make sure that we've got it right. Luckily, we've got great connections with other agents, as well as obviously speaking to yourself, Mike, and agents within VH to do the leisure work. So we feel quite comfortable that we've got our finger on the pulse of the market. And with a regional firm such as ours, we've got the 4 offices, and I think we're up to about 20 registered valuers. But we do try and make sure that leisure work, like other sectors, goes to experts, because it's a skill set that you can do across a regional base. But as we all know, that local knowledge is key. So, certainly you can pick a job up in Bristol and you can compare it across the region. But, if there's a property 20 minutes down the road, which is great competition compared to the one you're looking at, that knowledge when you're on site talking to the existing operator is a fantastic conversation to have in terms of where they see themselves fitting against the rival and really understanding where they sit.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And then any top tips? Someone in the hotel market looking at revaluing, things that they can be preparing in order to put their best foot forward and help with what you're doing.
Preparation is key. As a valuer, what you want to do is turn up and just know that the operator understands the process, what's required of them, what the valuer is going to have to do in order to do the report, which we've been instructed, because people want the valuation. So you'd expect everyone involved in the process to kind of be on board with that process in a positive way. I think the key thing I'd recommend is an early discussion with their accountants, because the accounts are so important. What you don't want to do is instruct a valuation and then in that valuation process suddenly realise that the accounts the valuer is basically hanging the value on aren't quite what you'd want them to be. So let's say, for example, they might have forgotten that 2-3 years ago the wage cost spiraled, or they did a massive investment. And it's just that thing of making sure that you understand the story and picture that your accounts are going to tell the valuer. So I think an early discussion with the accountant, get the account sorted, and kind of use the accountant, or if you've got it, use your friendly agent, your friendly valuer to give you that kind of critical friend approach in terms of, well, where do you see, do you see any particular problems here before we then try and get it valued? Or it would be the same, I guess, with Mike, with you in terms of putting it on the market. It's the same process of just making sure that it is the product that you think it is, because what we sometimes find as valuers is it's such an investment of time and love and money that you can sometimes be a bit too close to the business and not really be able to take a step back and appraise it and go, well, is it really at the occupancy levels that we should have wanted to be, and how does it compare price wise to the competition, etc. So our job is to try and work out where it fits into the marketplace. As an operator, you don't necessarily have to try and do that yourself, but sometimes that preparation will really help you understand where there might be problems. And the final thing I'd say is time with the valuer on site. Sometimes you turn up to a site and we don't even see the owner, and that's fine. Obviously we understand everyone's busy and it depends what season it is, but more often than not, those jobs where you don't spend a good quality hour on site with the owner, walking around the site, talking to them about the business, they're the ones where you nearly always have to go back and ask questions, because when you're on site, if you can talk to the owner as you walk around it, you just get a real feeling of what the business is, where it sits, the problems they've had, what we're going to see in the accounts, and really just get an understanding of where that property is in its own life cycle. Because it's much easier, I find, to do that on site in person than over the phone a week later when we're trying to get the report finished. They're desperately wanting us to get the report finished, but until you get all the ducks lined up, we're just not going to be able to issue that report.
No, perfect. Yeah, totally understood. So we've been running a poll while you and I have been talking, which I don't think, is it possible, Leslie, could we share that with the audience now? Because I think Robert will like the result. I'm not sure if that's possible at all, but hopefully we can see that. I think what you were saying, Robert, obviously hit home. Proven market knowledge is outstanding in its own field there at 95%. Of the audience, and probably more comforting, the cheapest quote hasn't received any.
Yeah, can we take a note of all the names of people that have done it?
We might have to go back and just check. Yeah, everyone that's happy with that. Robert, thank you for your time, and for those that are on the session again, if you've got any questions that you'd like Robert to address, please feel free to put that in the chat box. So we'll let you go, Robert. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
And then moving on, conscious of time, so we've got about another 15 minutes left. We're trying to sort of push this to 45 minutes if we can. So I'd just like to invite Robin Barker of Services for Tourism onto the screen. He's very well known to many of you, I'm sure, and is a real figurehead for what tourism is all about down here, and a huge supporter, particularly with the running of the tourism awards, for which Vickery Holman is a proud sponsor. Actually, it's actually good to give something back, and really vital for all the operators out there to be recognised for the hard work that they do. Robin, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for your contribution, and thanks for giving back. And we always welcome people wanting to give back to this industry. If there are any others here today who would like to be following in your lead, then that would be fabulous too.
Yeah, no, it's highly recommended. Now, I'm going to call on you, Robert, really to give us the tale of the tape, because you are really close to what's going on, across the spectrum. I know today is about hotels, and I hope that we can sort of get a bit of a southwest view today. But as well as that, I'd quite like to. You mentioned prior to this call you've been to a UK conference yesterday. Just to we can all be in our bubble and enjoying the tourism that's flooded down. Probably doesn't been good for everybody because they didn't want to get stuck on the A30 or the A38. But you can also give us perhaps a bit of a national view as part of this, if that's okay. Can I just hand over to you to do that?
By all means, and yes, and following on from Jason's comments, there is absolutely no doubt that staff recruitment and retention has been one of the biggest challenges over the last year, and that hasn't gone away. The latest stats are still showing it's twice the size of the problem that it was 18 months ago. I went around and visited a lot of businesses when we were handing out awards during the last year. I did have a few surprises because we had great conversations with some of the businesses. I was expecting every hotel to be saying, no, we can't keep and retain staff. Some of them were doing incentive schemes, staff member, get another staff member and we'll give you a bonus and so on. Some of the ones, though, that are in the right location, and that's mainly sort of near a conurbation and with colleges and large schools nearby, and those that have really worked with that community for years, offering placements, work experience, and so on. Some of those just said, no, we have not had a staffing problem at all. And that one surprised me. It's not easy for everyone. And yes, if you're in Salcombe, where renting a beach hut is going to make many of us bankrupt, it's very hard to do, but certainly something that is very, very well worth doing. Of course, if you're a holiday park, it's maybe easier. You stick a few extra caravans in the park somewhere and you can accommodate your staff there too. Pay, of course, very much into that as well. And Jason also touched on that, paying the living wage and not just the minimum wage, and probably more than that. And also increasingly, I think we've all seen the massive increase in dog ownership and this demand for flexible working. So if the people you want to employ have bought a dog in the last 18 months, are you going to put in place some way by which they can be looked after and worked around during their employment? So lots of interesting observations, I think, from going around. Mike, you mentioned yesterday I was at the Tourism Alliance conference with UK Hospitality. We had the tourism minister there who spent a long time telling us what a wonderful job he was doing. But he did share that tip that when we as an industry are lobbying and wanting more for government, don't just go in and say, give us more. Start, and this is fairly elementary psychology, start by giving a thank you and thanking government for supporting through furlough and so on, and then maybe going on to saying, but we have some ideas for how you can support an even more prosperous industry that will pay more taxes and so on. And even better if it comes at no cost from Treasury, because however much support or otherwise we get from tourism ministers, ultimately decisions are largely taken at the Treasury end. One fascinating presentation we had yesterday, though, was from a Dower Scott who gave everyone a bit of a shock. And he did finish by saying, in short, apologies for the language, in short, we're all buggered. And what he was doing was looking at the sector of the population that tourism has been relying on substantially for the last decade or so, and that's the baby boomers who own their own houses, now are getting towards retirement or in retirement. They've paid off their mortgages and they have disposable cash to be able to go on holiday and spend and so on. By 2030, many of those will have moved on. They won't be spending as much. And the next generation coming through, many of them won't have been able to buy their houses because of the lack of availability of housing and also the lack of mortgage for many of them from banks and so on. And the reality that there are many organizations, including people like John Lewis, who are going and buying up huge amounts of housing stock in order to rent. And when they reach retirement, they won't have paid off their mortgage. They're still going to be renting. And his forecast was by 2030, as an industry, very many of our core market will have disappeared unless we see mass structural change in the meantime, which I thought worth sharing. It certainly shocked yesterday's audience. The final point I was going to make is, in parallel, we've just seen the COP26 conference, and out of that has come the Glasgow Declaration on Tourism Action and the Tourism Declares initiative, which my own business has now signed up to. Interestingly, Visit Scotland has signed up to. And yes, I did put England on shame yesterday by pointing out that England is lagging behind. But the declaration is all about businesses who will make a commitment to have a climate action plan, to update that plan, to report annually, to measure carbon, to decarbonize, to regenerate, and essentially to collaborate. We've signed up. We don't know how we're going to do all of that. And we are very, very keen to be working with leading businesses and partners to find the best ways to mapping through that, including looking at points of detail like hot tubs, for instance, which everyone is installing hot tubs because the customers say they want them. But what are the good hot tubs? What are the ones that are less damaging in terms of energy and carbon and water and so on? And we have yet to find anyone with all the answers on that. So there's a call out there for collaborators to work with us. I'll end there. I'm more than happy to comment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Actually, if you don't mind staying on screen for a minute, Jason, could I invite you back? Maybe just to touch on Robin's last point there, just in terms of sustainability, people looking at their businesses, their carbon footprint, everyone picking up on the initiative. I don't know how that fits with Harbour at the moment.
So for us with Harbour, it's very much high on our agenda. We recently had a general managers meeting, and this was one of the main topics. With the Beach Club opening a new hotel this year, we thought it was a good opportunity to start doing things. So some of the initiatives we've got, we haven't got the little disposable shampoos and things. We've got glass bottles in the bathrooms, which from a British company. We stock majority Solcombe products, so all our beers are Solcombe Brewery, Solcombe Dairy Ice Cream, Solcombe Gin, of course, and the like. We've just doing some work with Solcombe Candle Company, Radswellies, all those kind of lots of little plugs going out there. But equally, things like the plastic key cards for the rooms. We've got bamboo ones now at the Beach Club as a new initiative. But actually, in our other properties, rather than the plastic ones we have, it's recycled ocean plastic. So there's things that tie in for us now equally to the water with a brand like Harbour. So there's lots and lots of things. Devonia water for us here, because they collect the glass bottle afterwards. It doesn't need to go through a recycling process. So there's lots and lots, and there'll be a lot to come from Harbour as a group over the next sort of 12, 18 months.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm looking at time, so we're doing all right, actually. We've got a little bit of time to try and address some questions, which I did see sort of dropping into the chat box. So bear with me as I show you how an old man tries to do two things at once. Got a few for you, Jason. I'm going to pick on you to begin with.
Okay.
You touched on recruitment and retention issues. This has come from John. How do you see this changing in the near future, and what plans do you have?
I don't think it will change much in the near future. I think it'll certainly for sort of 2022. I think they'll have similar challenges. It's the usual challenge of chefs has been there for years. What we've noticed now is that's spread further. Spa therapists are almost non-existent. But equally, some sort of positions where, like reception, which was always quite a straightforward one to recruit for, has been very difficult, as is housekeeping. Some of the initiatives we do, as I briefly touched on before, we put a seasonal variation in. So as when we're busier, we reward the staff greater. There's new staff incentives that are being worked on currently, flexible working, transport to and from where possible. We're constantly looking at what we can do to enhance that. The team experience as much as the guest one, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. And then a question from Rebecca, again to you, Jason. Have you seen any trends in new visitors this year? I'm not sure if that's fashion trends or if that's things that you're being asked for, perhaps. What people?
Yeah, a little bit difficult to answer that, in that the Beach Club is brand new. And I've been very much kind of head down here certainly through the majority of the summer season. I think it's been very much people wanting to be abroad, couldn't be, so being in the UK and making the most of actually that bit of good weather we did have, albeit could have been a lot more, but I wouldn't say anything particular stood out, but like I say, this is a brand new product, so a little bit more tricky.
Yeah, okay, understand that. I've got a question from Maria Millen. She was asking if if you're offering any incentives, if any at all, actually, for just to increase your bookings off season, or have you found that, you know, simply the year that we've had, that's taken care of itself largely? Interesting.
Yeah, largely taken care of itself. We work with a dynamic pricing model, so occupancy dictates rate. However, we, as a group, we hold firm with our rate. We believe that our product is worth what we charge for it. Therefore, we tend not to overly discount. We'll add some value as opposed to.
I think that's the right approach. I think if everybody does that, I think we'll be in a better place generally. Actually, yeah, be proud of what you've got. And again, Jason, everyone's picking on you. I think it's probably just the way that this is run through. Are there any changes driven by the pandemic that will now always be ingrained in the operating processes of the business, and some that you'd wish to see the back of?
I think hospitality is now looked upon as a real industry, which we weren't for a while. It was something people did while they were waiting to decide what they want to do properly. And I think there's now the government have recognised us as an industry more and more. I hope that stays. It's made us as an industry wake up a little bit and to look at how we do things. So I hope to see the back of the ridiculously long hours that keep getting reported for our industry and the low pay. I hope that's all gone now. It's not really been the case for a long time, but that's how it was reported. So I think hopefully the back of that, but really take us seriously as an industry and a big contributor to the economy.
I think the one that came through to me was VAT. And to a certain extent, although it's there, the VAT lobby doesn't seem to have had some of the momentum it's had in years gone by. Even when you had the opportunity, you had the VAT cut, and obviously that's reduced and what have you. I'm sort of surprised that hasn't been pushed a little harder, given the opportunity.
There's a lot being pushed. I think there's a certain reticence not to keep it at a lower level. But again, they'll be what it will be. I guess we'll keep on sort of fighting and do what we can for it. But I think those decisions have already been made, even though they may not have been announced.
Robin, it looks like you might have a comment on that.
It was also one of the topics of the conference yesterday, a half-hour presentation on the econometrics and the really detailed modelling, which actually uses the Treasury's own modelling systems and data to show the gain from cuts to tourism VAT. And I think the jury is still out on that one. Historically, tourism has lobbied for a cut from 20% down to 5%, and because that was the only other rate that was around. What the government has ended up doing is taking it to 12.5% until next March. I think if industry really get behind that and the evidence and the data, and shows that ultimately Treasury will end up taking more if they keep it at 12.5 rather than sticking it back up to 20, there is still a prospect, and the government seemed receptive to that. But it's Treasury that has to be lobbied rather than anyone else. And of course, that's every MP. You need to get to every MP, every councillor, the Treasury, to keep hammering away that message. But the evidence is there.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Moving on just on the questions. And again, we're sort of running out of time a little bit. Something came through from Ashley, which reading it, I think this followed Robert's involvement. Saying you've got a good point, which is ultimately about being prepared. And I'm guessing that Ashley is a solicitor, because he says, in addition to an accountant, I'd highly advise anyone going to market having a health check from a solicitor. Do many in your experience do this? If not, why not? If it's okay, Robert, I'll just pick that up from an agency point of view. It always surprises me when people are preparing to go to the open market, actually, how ill prepared they are, because all of the things that Robert wants, actually, as an agent, we also want. Because when you're going out and offering something for sale, the first thing that any interested party wants is all the information in order to make an informed decision. So yeah, it always seems to come at the end where a solicitor's involved, and an accountant probably they're a bit more involved from the get-go. But sorry, Robert, I've sort of jumped in to give my
No, I agree with you. I'm always surprised at how there's a lack of preparation exists. I think the problem with the solicitor, though, is that they're seen as the the final phase of the process. That I can almost imagine operators thinking, well, until I know I've got a sale agreed, I'm not going to incur any legal fees in prep work because there's no point. It's similar. There's also a question about reasons for having a valuation done. And Maria Millen asked about, do you only have a valuation when selling, or can you do this to help with forward planning? It's interesting because we've gone out to clients for years and tried to advise them and encourage them to get asset valuations done, whether it's leisure or commercial, because obviously we see a great benefit in understanding where the value's changed since they last had it done, because more often than not, most people only get a valuation done when they're told they have to, either by their bank manager or the tax man. Whereas actually, if the valuation is fluctuating, there are times that it's good to know that, because you then can if you've got a specific objective you're trying to achieve, pick the right time. But in the grand scheme of things, most operators just go, well, why would I want to have a valuation and incur that cost when I don't actually need one? So it's quite a difficult one to try and sell. So in my experience, usually the main valuations that are requested are for bank purposes and or potentially tax.
Again, from an agency point of view, our job is business generation. So more often than not, I'm out and in the region wanting to meet up with operators, give a view on the market, and give some reasonable advice as to how they can prepare to sell, and most likely where their value will end up being. So I tend to write to people if I'm heading down. Today I'm in Truro. I'll have a day in Cornwall, and I'll try and see as many people as I can on an ad hoc basis, once, twice a year, sometimes, just to keep in touch, let them know what's going on, if that also helps.
Absolutely.
Robert then comes and signs it off sometime later, invariably. A quick one from Anne. She's asked, Robert, are you offering a bird's eye view on a quarterly basis for continued support?
We don't. We obviously do our own kind of internal market commentary, which then gets put into the reports that we issue out to our clients when they're instructed. I guess kind of part of the webinar series is supposed to be our way of trying to kind of keep in touch with the marketplace. But yeah, we don't issue kind of industry-wide statistics or benchmarks at the moment now.
Okay, thank you. And then I think a final one, and actually this is probably one for everybody a little bit on the panel. Besides star ratings, what are the other key benchmarks you feel hoteliers need to monitor? I'm just going to kick that off, because I always have found star ratings a little odd in the world we live in, where we're almost on reputation management these days, and there are some out there that have ignored star ratings altogether. But I'm going to throw that open. I'm going to pick on you first, Jason, if that's okay, being an operator, just to get your take on that.
I think the reputation management side of things, that's never going to go away now. That's there forever. And all our hotels, except for the Beach Club, currently are graded. But that's as much really to use internally as externally, as a sense check, really. We also do our own benchmarking. Our exec team will visit the properties to make sure that we're maintaining and looking after the properties. They view all of the guest feedback, so we use our own online platform as well to give us that information. So I think in terms of, you've obviously got, from the legislative perspective, the scores on the doors and all those sort of things, they're all there. That it's a very public world now. So as well as your annual AA visit or RAC in the old days, that would come and sort of tell you where you were. But we get told that every day now.
Yeah, I think that's right. Robin, this one's probably quite pertinent to yourself as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And yes, I mean, as Jason identifies, it's a very diverse market out there, and just having one scheme, AA, doesn't really match the diverse different groups. But I would say this, wouldn't I? There's winning a tourism award, which is very much part of recognition. And Jason and Sulcombe Harbour has been a regular winner in the tourism awards for many years. So that one I would put as top of the tree in many ways. But you've also got more specific ones like the REST, Responsible, Ethical, Sustainable Tourism Scheme, the Safe, Clean and Legal scheme. And that's much more relevant to the self-catering side, particularly with all the Airbnbs out there, which are many of which are highly questionable on their legality and safeness. And then all the reviews, and that's no longer just TripAdvisor. It is Google, it's Trustpilot, it's use of Facebook and the reviews and so on. Those are all things that you can take account of in planning what you're going to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Forgive me, I'm looking down through the chat, mindful we're sort of overrunning, and I don't want to ignore anybody, but unfortunately, I think we're going to have to on a couple. I think there's certainly some good feedback actually from your comments, Robin, just when we talk about net zero, how we sort of try and get the, if you like, the popular speak into the business speak, and the reason why. But I think you've come back on that. I think you've already managed to secure a sponsor by the looks of things as I'm going through this. Robin, that's
I missed that one.
And I think hopefully that might tie up everything. Forgive me if we've missed anybody out, but we will keep the transcripts, and if there is anything in specific, we will come back to people. We've got all your email addresses, so we'll be straight over to you. So that wraps up pretty much today's session. Thanks again to the panelists. It's not an easy thing to give you time and to do something live. So technically, I think we've survived. I think that there's been a lot of ground covered today. From a Vickery Holman point of view, this series is going to continue. So you can see on your screen that we'll move to pubs and food in mid-January, and then we'll go through all of the sectors that we cover as a business. I'm pretty sure we'll pick up with Robin again to have your sage advice down the line. But if there's anybody on the webinar today that would like to join, please let us know. And I think I only wanted to ultimately finish just to say it's now basically time for everyone to go out, support your local venues, book a meal, have a drink, and why not stay a night or two, particularly Salford. We better leave it on that, hadn't we? Panelists, thank you. Everybody, thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks very much.